difficult thing to do. Is typically says, well, the board can come up with that, but the legislature's never going to go for it.
Yeah, it's like 4 years for government, it's like everybody agrees it should be done, but nobody's ever gonna do it.
Yep, pretty much.
But, I don't know, I hope we can at least make them think about it, make them explain why they don't do it.
Right. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Tom. Is that doorknob the problem or is?
It's locked.
Okay.
Yeah. We finally put in a doorbell.
Gotta keep the rabbit out.
That's right. I'm surprised not to see Tom Little here yet.
Yeah. I guess most folks are gonna be on today. Huh?
You wanna turn the sound up?
Good morning.
There we go. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear us all right?
Good morning.
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 Audio is fine, and the video. Thank you, Michael.
Excellent.
Well, we've certainly been inundated with reading material.
Good way to pass the weekend, right?
A few other things to do at the weekend.
Hmm.
So they got mixed in too. Some of these things keep saying the same thing over and over again. So.
You been able to play with any maps?
No, I met with Tom and Mia on Friday, but I haven't had a chance to do anything else since.
You got a few minutes after we wrap up, maybe we can brainstorm a little bit.
I started with Barrytown, which is an easy two members. Barry City likewise. And I did Williamstown and Roxbury. Quite deep by a few hundred feet. But it would take a slice of Northfield, I think, with 17 residents. Even like them up.
Good morning.
Hey,
Good morning.
Come
how was the
on.
drive? Must have been beautiful.
Gorgeous.
in.
Slow in certain spots, but yes. Beautiful. Hopefully. A little faster than I expected. And you?
Well, I was at 89, so there's some pretty,
Oh.
there's some nice sites
that's
over
good.
89. I'll go back, I'll go home the back way.
Yeah,
Did you come over the notch?
I went over Lincoln Gap.
Or like, you know, the
Because
gas.
I live,
Yep.
I live right beside of it actually,
Uh-huh.
so that's,
That's a gorgeous drive,
It's a really-
under any circumstances, but now especially.
it's quite nice and, steep.
Yeah. Well, first time we ever went over Lincoln Gap, my father was driving, my mother was in the right seat. I was in the back seat. And we're going up from Lincoln. And my mother, oh, Elmer, this is so beautiful. It's so wonderful. We go over the top and start going, I think I'm gonna puke.
Oh, no, that's all, it used to be dirt too, more dirt.
Yeah, well, this was in the
I'm
sixties.
sure it was dirt. Yeah, I think the first time I couldn't quite believe it was a real road. Because there's certain sections that are insane, you feel like you're gonna fall over backwards.
So we have a quorum
Yes,
here.
yes.
We don't have Tom Little.
I know, what-
And haven't heard from him.
uh-oh.
I guess that we're at 9:03. We can wait a little bit longer if.
Oh, is this Tom pulling in?
That could be.
Oh, he's scraping right up against the side of that nice silver truck out there.
I parked back in the back of the parking lot. Am I gonna
Yeah, that should be
finish?
fine. No,
Okay.
you'll be fine.
I got along the, yeah. I couldn't tell if there was a space here, so I didn't.
Yeah, we should be good. Normally it'd be a little harder to find parking. but it's good
Is
spot.
this so much? Well, I
Go back.
I-
Yes, that's Tom. He's in the parking lot. We can see him. Give it another couple minutes here.
Chairman of the Health and Welfare Committee, one of the things they said was if I happen to be late, I expect to see meeting in progress. That's what the vice chair is for. Didn't always work well.
Yes. Do we have a vice chair of this board?
We do not.
I'll have one of those.
It's worth waiting for. Maybe that can make, I'm sure we hear from him.
Good morning.
Good.
Tom?
That's, um,
President of your county, living.
What's that?
A resident of your county. is gonna be testifying.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I'm the only one without a mask.
Okay. Fine with me, Tom. I have an 11-year-old at home who's not vaccinated, so I'm trying to be a little bit.
How are we doing with the quorum of the committee?
That's not very.
We have-
Try to go to the phone.
Yeah, there's one over here too, Jeannie, I can run to.
Yeah,
Mary,
I think the whole gang's here.
Right here. Yeah, I can run right across.
Oh, wait, I know, the chair was on.
Well,
No?
let's try this one because now the air conditioner works.
Everything is 10 years old. Doesn't last very long without juice.
Oh, wow, that's pretty good that you coaxed 10 years. Ago.
Well, they discontinued it, and I like the size of it. So I don't want to get rid of it.
Yeah, I've got
Yes,
mine.
we are,
I think all the new ones don't have like.
Eric is
ports.
taking care of the video upstairs and we are recording, so we're ready to go.
But I'm afraid of losing this one. I work, my pad doesn't work, so I have to get a mouse. Let's see.
Let's try. Yeah, just like what- I'll see if I can find it.
Thank you. You know, I used one in here last time. So, just making trouble. Usual.
What's the Wi-Fi?
Oh, it's over there.
It's SOS guest,
Oh,
and the password is SOS guest 2018. all four words.
already.
Still looking good.
One, two, okay.
This again.
Browsing.
Being meeting. Yeah,
All set?
okay, good morning. This is Tom Little, Chair of the Apportionment Board, calling the meeting to order. Thank you all for tuning in. The meeting is being recorded. We have a full complement of the membership of the Apportionment Board with us today, either at the Secretary of State's office or participating by Zoom remote platform. This next item of business is the review and approval of the minutes of the board's August 30, 2021 meeting, which have been circulated and posted. Does anyone on the board have any additions or corrections to make or suggest? Hearing none, then I would be happy to entertain a motion to approve the draft minutes as posted.
Sure, I'll make that motion.
Second.
Rob and made the motion, and Jean has seconded the motion. Any debate? All in favor of the motion, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no, or likewise raise your hand. The ayes have it, and we've adopted the minutes of the August 30th meeting, bringing us to public comment under the provisions of section 312H of Title I of the Vermont statutes annotated. And I'd like to see if I can recognize anyone here. Mr. Kraus, would you like to have a few moments to address the board?
Actually, I would. Thank you very much, Chairman Little. First of all, good morning, folks. For the record, my name is Matt Kraus. I'm a resident of Stowe. And I just want to mention that the testimony I'll give this morning is for myself, or it's my testimony. I do not belong to any group, organized political group, etc. My testimony is based upon my own real-world experience. And it's my belief that multi-member districts, and I'll use this word, cheat Vermonters in two ways. And the first way is the most important way. I think it cheats Vermonters by denying them the opportunity to see you. And by that, I mean to say, constituents and people who when you're running for political office, don't care about your, what bills you sponsored, etc. They want to see you in person, on their doorstep, knocking on their door, seeking their vote on their terms. They want to see you at local events, such as craft fairs at the Canadian Club, Moutoir Feeds, if you know Barry, dances, ward events, select board meetings, etc. And a single member district permits individuals to do that. The second way it cheats Vermonters is by effectively denying them a real opportunity to seek and win states in the legislature. It ends up a very tilted table. Now, I'd like to quickly give you some background. I've served both in the House of Representatives and I've served in the Vermont Senate. I ran 4 contested races and I never lost. When I ran for the House of Representatives, it was a 1-member district, single-member district. My competitor was a 4-term incumbent. They were a chair of the committee. They were born and brought up in the town that I was living in, which is Berry City. They had a business there. So the question really becomes is how does a person beat someone like that? And the answer very simply is shoe leather. When I campaigned for that seat, I went through the district not once, but twice. I went through the first time as a curiosity and the second time as a competitor. Now, the seats at the time, I believe, were 3,300 people in a district. So I was very, very lucky that it was small enough for me to be able to do that. And I was fortunate to win. It was also an urban district, very small. And if you know Berry City, it's a bowl. And the district I ran in was 1/3 of that bowl. There were no rural communities, just a very tight urban center. I also ran for the Senate. I ran against 3 incumbents who had a total of 42 years experience. All were chairmen of their committees. I was fortunate to beat a 7-term incumbent to get to the Senate. Now, did I work hard? You betcha. I worked as hard as I could. I campaigned in all 20 of those communities. But I also raised and spent $17,500 in 1992 money. And that was to get name recognition. Now, that was donated by hundreds of Vermonters. Now, I also had some advantages that most Vermonters don't have. I was living in the largest community in that county. I was a former employee of Central Vermont Medical Center with 1,200 employees. I was employed by the state of Vermont, which had at that time, I think, 7,500 employees. I was a Norwich University graduate, which is the largest academic institution in Washington County. Most folks don't have the advantages I had to run that race. They'll never have them. Now, multi-member districts, as I understand it, don't permit you to use shoe leather. I think if it's a 2-member district, it will be somewhere in the vicinity of 8,400 people. That's as near as I can understand your numbers. And in Lamoille County, for example, we have 2-member districts, each of which have 4 communities. I'm pretty sure that I will tell you that there's no way that people can bang on those doors for 8,400 people in 4 towns, in rural towns. They simply cannot do it. So they're effectively being frozen out. Now, I hope as the VAB continues its work, I would please ask you to remember the Vermonters' perspective, small, average Vermonters who might want to seek a position in the legislature. I would ask you to please remember not to make sure that the process is such that they don't feel cheated. My final comment is this. I serve on the District 5 Environmental Commission. And I think you could probably understand that on occasion we face controversy and some impossible choices. When I have a tough day, I say to myself, it could be worse. I could be a member of the Vermont Apportionment Board. So I want you to know that I understand how challenging your role is. And I'm pleased that that I serve as the chair of the District 5 Environmental Commission. I wish you the best of luck. I thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you choose to ask me. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll end my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Kraus. Is there anyone else during public comment who would like to address the board? Is this everyone who's on the screen?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes, would you like to have a swing at it, take a swing at it?
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Tom Hughes, and I work for the Vermont Public Interest Research Group, also known as VPIRG. And I'm delighted to join you this morning to share our recommendation that the Legislative Apportionment Board propose single-member House districts and single-member Senate districts in the work that you do coming up in the next few weeks. And we make that recommendation for three reasons. First, we believe that single member districts foster local community. They are by nature going to be smaller geographically than many of the current districts, which, currently some senators have to drive an hour to get from one corner of their district to another, and it would be nice to shrink that. Also, the smaller population size will foster more connections between legislators and constituents. The second reason that we support single member districts is that we believe they'll afford more accountability and competitiveness in elections. As Mr. Kraus was just sharing his personal experience, we agree with many of the points that he just made. As you probably know, the re-election rate for incumbents, particularly in the Vermont Senate, is very high. If you were running for re-election in the Vermont Senate under the same party banner as you got elected in the first place, within the last 10 years, you're over 99% of senators have been re-elected in that scenario. We believe the smaller districts would allow for more competitiveness in elections, and as Mr. Kraus mentioned, also lower costs for entering into elections, and we believe that's very important. Finally, we believe that single member districts are fundamental to fairness and equal representation. The current situation where some people have 2 or 3 or 4 or 2 or 3 or 6 senators versus people who only have 1 creates an unlevel playing field, and people with multiple representatives and multiple senators simply have more representation in Montpelier than people with serving in single or living in single member districts currently. So we recommend single member districts to level the playing field across the state, and absent moving to single member districts, at least move to a map that proposes equal number of districts. So either 150 single member House districts or 75 2-member districts, but not a mishmash of some single and some double 2-member districts. and with the same calculation on the Senate side. So for those reasons of fostering local community, affording more accountability and fundamental fairness, we recommend that the board propose single member districts this fall. Thank you for the opportunity to join.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. Representative Sims, good morning and welcome. Would you like to address the board? Are you here to take some notes and listen? Or would you like to address us?
Yeah, thanks. I'm here just to listen. Might come back in the future and say something, but really just listening here today. Thank you.
Keeping in mind the agenda we have for the rest of the meeting, we may have a few minutes here to accommodate the questions from the board to the two persons who spoke during public comment. Does anyone have a question? We're going to get into this debate ourselves in a moment. So, Ed, do you have anything you'd like to ask any of the two members of the public, or would you like to go to the next agenda item?
You talking to me?
Yes, I am.
No, I don't have any questions for the members of the public, but thank you. I could walk over to Tom's house later and ask him some questions.
You know where to find me.
So the next item on the agenda is a general discussion of the single versus two-member House district question that the board has been, I think, nibbling at for months. Likewise, single versus multi-member Senate districts. And I'd like to thank everyone on the board who has been sending in, as requested, materials that address that issue from one angle or another. And I would just like, and I have some comments I'm going to make that didn't get, I was trying to work on a sort of a synthesis of the materials that have been filed and the discussions that we've had as a board previously, but that only came together around 4:30 or 5 o'clock this morning, so it's really not in good enough shape to post, but I will essentially be reading from it in a while, but I don't want to grab the microphone right away. Who on the board would like to lead off?
Did you say 4:30 or 5 o'clock? Was that after you milked the cow?
We had to sell the herd, Tom.
Tom, if I could just preface this for the members of the public who may be watching or watching the recording, all those materials that the board members sent in can be found on the lab's website under the resources tab. So there were various articles and opinion pieces that came in. We posted them all out there for the board members to be able to review in one place and for the public to be able to see. And then you referenced previous discussions of the board, and I don't want to confuse anyone with that. And that you're referring to 2011 discussions, I believe.
No.
Previous discussions of the board around single member
Yeah,
versus multi-member.
I think we've been nibbling around the edges of
Okay.
it in prior meetings. This
Got it.
go around this year.
All right.
And I think at the last meeting, we decided it made sense to devote an agenda item to it and ideally come to some consensus about how that, if we reach a consensus, how that should inform the actual mapping work that we do, as opposed to maybe more of an abstract philosophical idea about single versus two-member districts. When we're actually doing the mapping work and redistricting work, how should the consensus on that inform and prioritize what we actually do when we're mapping? Because that's where the rubber meets the road.
Well, I can start. I've made it clear that I favor single-member districts. Partly for some of the reasons that our visitors have expressed. Having campaigned in a two-member district, I tell you, I couldn't get around the whole district. In one campaign season, I tried to keep track of where I had been, so the next time I covered new territory. But I got about 40% of the covered each election cycle. I don't think that's satisfactory. Some of the information that we've been looking at here sort of indicates that two-member districts favor women. I don't quite understand that. I can't imagine why it would be. And quite frankly, having majored in political science in college, I don't put a lot of stock in studies like that, because in many cases it's a matter of lying with numbers, lying with statistics. But maybe that's the case. On the other hand, the information seems to say that single-member districts favor minorities. I think I can imagine why that would be. When I started trying to use Maptitude, the first thing I did was wipe out all the racial information that they provide, which took quite a bit of time because of the combinations that they come up with. But as far as I'm concerned, the racial information is irrelevant. And if you don't know what the racial composition is of the district you're creating, you can't be accused of gerrymandering for racial purposes. So I just try to discard all that. Unfortunately, I got to a roadblock on using that. So, I think when we do this, what we ought to do is create two maps. Because we know that the legislature is going to be inclined toward incumbent protection, and two-member districts favor that. It's also, two-member districts are simpler. It would be much easier to take the existing district and tinker with them a bit and say our work is done. Much more difficult to create single-member district from scratch. But I think what I think we ought to do is come up with an agreed single-member map and submit that to the legislature as our recommendation, but also have a two-member, a map with two-member districts in reserve as an alternative, because single-member districts are going to be a hard sell in the legislature. But I think the support we just heard, I know it's broader than that, will help with trying to persuade the legislature that single-member districts are far more available than what we have. So that's my piece.
That's your story, you're sticking to it, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else want to take a shot at this?
Yeah, I'll go next if that's okay.
Sure, Jeremy.
So while I definitely appreciate Tom's perspective on the lies, damn lies, and statistics angle there, I'm not quite so cynical about the political science research, in part because I've unfortunately, for better or for worse, have been involved in some of that. However, I think one of the things that's important to distinguish here, because these papers are talking about a lot of different things, and I think we need to make sure that in our conversations that we're talking about whether single or multi-member districts are good and for whom. So a lot of this research is talking about getting better representation among elected representatives. It's not necessarily talking about better representation for individuals in the district. So I think if we can make sure that we're making the distinction between, are we trying to do better by our elected officials, or are we trying to do better by the folks that elect them? I just want to put that out there. I do also support single member districts, mainly because it's more about the individual person living in the district. While I think that we have a lot of work to do in terms of gender and racial and other parity in the Vermont legislature and the Vermont's congressional delegation, for example, I don't know that that going to more multi-member districts will necessarily solve that. There were a lot of factors that were identified in these papers, and Vermont seems to check a lot of the other check boxes that make it easier, finger quotes, easier for women and minorities to run. I'm not convinced by the papers that I've read that it's necessarily the case that moving to all single member districts will change, will make it harder for women and non-white folks to run. I think I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, Jeremy. Mary, would you like to weigh in?
Sure. I'm having lived in both multi-member and single-member districts. As a constituent, I have not felt any great difference. The difference to me depends more on the individual that I end up with than on whether I have one of them or two of them. And that's kind of not going to matter whether it's single member or multi-member. And I'm not convinced that either is better for any reason. But what I am convinced of after having played around with some maps is that we are so constrained by geography and population distribution that I don't see any reason to try to lock ourselves into one or the other. I tried making 15 two-member Senate districts, and I was focused on doing that and keeping the deviations as small as possible. So my total deviation was under 10%, but I ended up with a couple of totally absurd districts, including one that sort of snaked across the middle of the state. It was contiguous, but not compact. So when you try to address all our constitutional and statutory constraints, I mean, it's a noble effort to make all equal districts, but it may not be possible. So it's not my priority.
Jane, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks everyone for contributing your thoughts and research and other information. I feel like it's been really useful, since even just knowing that this is going to be part of the discussion today, thinking more carefully about what our role is. And one of the things I came back to in looking at research and other information people have sent around, the board has sent, and that is now posted so people can look at that, around this question of single versus multi-member and what the pros and cons might be. I was drawn to going back to the state constitution and the statutes to just reaffirm our primary standards and principles that we have to be using. Because even for myself, having some thoughts about and some of the research I shared around what's considered kind of the gold standard in terms of voting in elections, of which districts themselves are a part. I kept coming back to the fact that as a board, we have certain statutory requirements for what we need to be focused on. That being primarily kind of the foundational criterion being the numerical standard. That is the ideal members, the ideal size of the district. However number of members they are in there. And then followed by the additional criteria that we are also statutorily required to pay attention to. This would be the respecting town and county boundaries, other patterns, geography, social interaction, trade. I have it written here, I wouldn't remember otherwise. Political ties and other common interests, and then the compactness and contiguity. So from my perspective, what's been useful in some ways, aside from just hearing the different views, which there's always going to be something. I find it helpful just to hear the different people's different views about what makes the different types of districts better or worse, including the public testimony we heard today. I still keep coming back to the fact that whatever we as a board do with respect to the type of maps we create, they all have to be grounded in these statutory requirements, number one. And then, and so for me, thinking in terms of whether we might want them to be all one kind or all another kind, would always have to kind of, we may think that that's a good idea, but it's not, it can't be the driving force in my reading of the way the statutes are. Instead, I'd like to take a more locally responsive approach, thinking about what makes the most sense in a given district or in a given area or a given region. And that's just kind of my current thinking about it. The research that I sent, as I just mentioned a few minutes ago, I mean, I'm particularly interested in the fact that I think it's easy to think of the districts and the process we're doing as somehow separate from the electoral process. But of course, it's not at all separate. It's the first part in a way, it's like the foundational part. And the dynamics of an election in a district are both, it's combined.
I'm sorry.
It's always going to be a combination of the type of district and the electoral system, among other factors potentially. So on the one hand, so I like to think about that, and I like to think about the bigger picture. I do recognize that as a board, we have certain priorities, and I'm sort of come back around to wanting to make sure to be focusing everything through those priorities. That makes sense.
I guess I'm last on the deal team. Well, mark this moment in your calendars for history. I agree with everything the representative from BPERC said in his testimony. I sent around a memo to everybody a week or so ago, or maybe a little less, that is posted on the resource page, outlining my thoughts, which are very much in favor of single member districts. And I won't go through all of those points now because some of them have been stated by members of the committee and members of the public. But the couple that I do want to bring up as going back to a former life when I was I was chairman of the Vermont Republican Party and in charge of recruitment, is just how difficult it is to recruit candidates in multi-member districts. Because it becomes mathematically impossible. If you're one person, if you have one candidate running in a two-member district against two incumbents or two challengers or whatever, it becomes almost mathematically impossible for that person to win. And it, to my mind, is just an unfair barrier to put up against any candidate. And that leads to a couple of things. One, you have a candidate who's just, I can't win because the numbers don't work and I'm not going to run, which is not good for democracy. Or they run and they're uncompetitive, which is not good for democracy. Or they get what's called a sponge candidate in the tradition of Vermont, in the colloquialisms, which means somebody who has no interest in running for office, but agrees to put their name on the ballot to soak up partisan votes, but they have no interest in running or serving. I thought I just turned this off. I apologize. Sorry. None of which is, as I said in my note, that's not democracy at its best when you have people who are uncompetitive or on the ballot but don't want to be on the ballot. And it also, you have the money differences that other people mentioned as well. So I'll just bring up that one point, as it's the one point that I mentioned that I didn't hear anybody else say. But in conclusion, I am in favor of moving forward with single member districts for the House and the Senate.
I have a quick follow-up, but I don't want someone else
Well, Ed,
who hasn't
can
spoken
you,
yet. Yeah.
Ed, why don't we hear from Ed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to just first start out by addressing something that I don't think I've heard come up, at least to the meetings that I've been to, but I think it's a bit of the elephant in the room. This is a partisan commission, okay? I think we fortunately avoid a lot of the pitfalls that more acrimonious partisan politics play in other states, and we're very lucky for that. But nevertheless, it's still a partisan commission, and it's not a perfect line, but I do see, as happened last time, the progressives and the Republicans favoring the single member districts and myself. I heard two folks that were not as sure, haven't heard from Tom yet. But let's be very clear, in some parts of the state, the status quo favors Democrats. For example, in the Chittenden County District, you can't get elected in the current composition if you're not a Democrat. I mean, it's next to impossible, right? But if the Chittenden County Senate District were broken into single seat districts, one could very easily see a scenario where there's a progressive or two elected. And I'm not talking about combo candidates. I mean, it's just as a progressive or just as a Republican in some of the northern tier towns. So I do think that there's a political component that we do need to address and speak about. I'm trying to look at it from I consider myself a moderate, trying to look at this from the greatest equitable perspective. And the folks from Huntington have been very good at lobbying, if you want to call it that, because they feel like they're cut off from having a voice. We're never going to be able, no matter what we do, there's going to be somebody that's unhappy. So that when we're looking at the statutory requirements, which Jeannie was referring to earlier on, those are pretty mushy, And the case law that I sent out was pretty clear that the overriding concern is that the districts are, that there's not too much deviation in and amongst the districts and the numbers of people that are in the districts. But as far as the actual statutory requirements, I think people can make good arguments for anything using those requirements because they're so mushy. Now, a small c conservative would argue we should retain the status quo. And there may be that argument coming yet, but I don't see any reason to maintain a status quo, even if it's going to be difficult and even if it's going to be upsetting to some folks because they're put in with a different town, like the Chase Mill district of Burlington, which has 100 or so people in it, which is part of the Winooski district. There are just going to be some folks that are in different districts. Are the folks that live in the Chase Mill district, do they have needs that are dramatically different from Winooski? I don't think so. If you lumped in a town in Chittenden County with a town in the Northeast Kingdom by drawing some imaginary bridge, then I could see somebody complaining. But if some folks are in with a town that's adjacent to them, I understand where they're coming from, but it's not going to be a perfect system no matter what. And the final point that I want to raise is builds on what's been said to some extent already, but I personally don't think that we should have a volunteer legislature. I believe that it makes it inequitable or allows people with certain types of jobs to essentially get paid to be legislators. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. And knowing that that's the case, I think it's for somebody that actually has to work. Is it fair that they have to then work twice as hard to run in a 2-seat district or a three-member Senate district or a 2-member Senate district than in a 1-seat? And I would argue that it is absolutely unfair that they have to work twice as hard, take time away from their job, take time away from their family. I mean, it's not easy to run in a single-seat district, but nothing that we can do about that sitting here. So thank you for listening.
Yeah. So I'll give you my thoughts now. And it goes something like this. They're still, I guess, I'm still turning these thoughts over in my mind, and this discussion has been useful. But I frame it something like this. The question for the board is not whether single-member districts are better than 2-member districts, at least in some absolute way. Where a group of 2 or more towns can be combined in a district that satisfies the Vermont constitutional and statutory requirements and guidelines, the district may be either a single or a 2-member district. The law establishing the apportionment board does not tell the board whether or how to favor one type of district over the other. The Constitution does not either, and the Vermont Supreme Court has never given any reason to favor one type of district over the other. As we've seen in the last week, social and political science teach that there are tendencies associated with single-member versus 2-member districts, but the application of these tendencies to Vermont is not always clear, and we must be mindfully cautious about the law of unintended consequences. The board's work will be evaluated by how it achieves the constitutional and statutory requirements and guidelines across the entire state, not in any particular district or even a region. When building a single district, and even more so when proposing a statewide redistricting map, the board, and I think in its turn, the General Assembly, must observe the following, and I think in the following order of priority. 1, districts must have, quote, minimum, end quote, deviation percentages. Vermont does not define minimum, but Vermont and US Supreme Court decisions tell us that an overall deviation under 10% is presumptively constitutional, and one somewhere greater than 16% may be problematic. The redistricting map's overall deviation will be evaluated in light of how thoughtfully and carefully certain other factors are expressly considered in drawing the map. So these other factors are, as we've been talking, preservation of existing political subdivision lines, i.e. town, city, and county lines, recognition and maintenance of patterns of geography, social interaction, trade, political ties and common interests, and use of compact and contiguous territory. When ruling on a challenge to a redistricting plan, the courts give significant weight to these non-numerical factors, at least where it is clear that these factors were actually considered. You can see this play out, for example, in the thorough discussion and rulings in the 1993 Vermont Supreme Court decision in the challenges to the General Assembly's 1992 reapportionment plan, in reapportionment of Heartland, which consolidated, I think, 5 distinct challenges, 4 to the House map and 1 to the Senate map, all in one case. So there's a very comprehensive discussion of the law around redistricting. So I think where I come out is, as we build new districts, leave existing districts alone and tweak existing district, we should follow these requirements and guidelines. If we do that and reach consensus on a new map that has more single member districts than the current map, I will support that and think we all will be able to. And I think that's where it boils down to. If you can build right now, I think we have 44 two-member districts. Sounds about right. In the prior decade, we had 41 or 42. So that's in the House. That's more than half of the House is in two-member districts, a little more than half. So if we are able, I keep going back to the fact that our mandate, our instructions from the people of the state of Vermont through the Constitution and statute focuses on the minimum deviation percentages and these other specific factors. And that's our menu, that's our direction. And if we can satisfy those statewide and increase the number of single member districts, I don't have a philosophical or ideological issue with that. I think the debate over, that we've been hinting at today over which is better or easier to run in could go on for a long time. And I think my own personal view is that it would be one thing to advocate that to the General Assembly as a way, as part of changing the law that applies to the Apportionment Board. But I don't want to get too aggressive in going beyond those at all, going beyond the instructions that we have and the guidelines that go on top of that. And I think as we're finding out individually doing these maps, experiments, a lot of this sort of plays out when you actually start mapping. And if you are, I think, if you emphasize single member districts as a good in and of themselves, notwithstanding these other legal factors, you will end up, I think, with a more tenuous overall map. But I think the good news here from this discussion is that I think we all agree on what the statutory and constitutional requirements and guidelines are. And if somebody can come up with a map with more single member districts than I come up with that satisfies those criteria, I mean, for me, as I said, I don't have a problem with that.
So Tom, if we make an effort to reduce the number of two-member districts, one way that we can do that is by taking some of these towns like Barrytown that is a two-member district and saying, okay, Board of Civil Authority, you have to
Mhm.
divide that into 2 single-member districts. That would apply to Berry City. It would apply, I think, to St. Albans City. Would you support that?
Well, there's two ways, yes, I think so. I think there's two ways of doing that. One is that the apportionment board could say in Berry, this is where we're going to draw the line as to divide it into 2 single-member districts. Send it out to the boards of civil authority and wait and see what they say. And they could say terrific, or they could say fat. And propose either keeping it as a 2-member district or drawing a line someplace else. That's, I think, one approach. The other approach is for us to say, and this is, I think we did this 10 years ago, Rob, with Burlington. I don't think they ever did anything. We said, Barry, we think this should be 2 single-member districts. We'd ask you to draw the line because you know the territory better than we do. They can come back and say, yeah, we would draw it here, or they can say, we think that's a terrible idea, don't do that.
Or what they did, which was silence.
Silence.
So, yeah, I think that's one way of getting at the patterns of, you know, the number B is that the.
But that would apply to Winooski, it would apply to Burlington, all those 2-member districts, put them in a single.
Bennington, Essex.
Randolph, there's a ton.
But I also agree that, and I said this, I probably more times than I care to remember, that I think the report that we give to the General Assembly should have, at least in an appendix, more than, it's all public record, but I think we should be able to show the General Assembly that this is the map for the House, for the Senate that the board approved officially. These are the other variations or different ways of doing it that we also worked on, and you have the advantage of that.
Essentially what I
Jean, yes.
I just had a quick follow-up, that's more an observation. I'm not pushing any particular, action in result of this, but I was curious about some of the, and I haven't run as a candidate, so I don't want to pretend to say I can understand why. Obviously, more territory is more territory. There's no question about that. Although I've certainly seen people hustle and make it happen. So, but in any case, the other part of it, thinking about the type of representation people might get in a, not so much that actually, just the dynamics of a single member versus a double member district. And I remembered, and that's why I apologize, I was looking some stuff up while people were talking. I remembered that I had noticed at one time how many Senate districts didn't have any, that were only had one candidate running. So completely non-competitive, no choice for the candidate, for the residents in those districts. And 2 of the 3 single member Senate districts had only one candidate in 2020. And there was at least some choice in all the multi-member districts on the Senate side. And similarly on the House side, there were many more. I just counted them up. I think this is right. I don't want to, because I just did it sort of quickly. It looks to me like there were in the vicinity of 32 districts that had no, that were non-competitive in terms of cross-party. That, in a single member, there would be
32 single member districts that were.
32 House districts, 32 House districts that were non-competitive.
The incumbents ran unopposed.
I don't know if it was the incumbent or if it was just there was not a multi-party race. And again, I want to check this, but it looks to me like it was 24-8 single versus multi-member.
It might be a new member. I remember way back when Kevin Mullen ran unopposed in Rutland Town.
It's not, yeah, it's not
as a
always,
New member.
right, it's not always an incumbent.
Yeah.
So it's not speaking about incumbency necessarily, although often it is that. It's just that I think there are these dynamics that haven't come up yet, and I just wanted to mention them, that it does, at least for the moment, again, I'm just looking at 2020, historically it would be a better thing to do if we were really interested in this question. That it may very well be that non-competitiveness is more prevalent in single member than in multi-member districts. So it's just one of the factors that I think contributes to, the overall points people have been making, which is there's not going to be one single method, in my view, there's not going to be one single method that's going to be beneficial in all cases. And as I think Tom was saying, and I'm now leaning more towards the North Star for us, at least just initially, are the statutory requirements and how we make sure to abide by those.
So, yeah, I think we all agree on that.
We're gonna follow the law.
That helps.
Well, what I can, anything, Mary, Ed, or Jeremy, you want to weigh in again or add something to what's just been shared? Or not? Okay.
Not for me either.
What I can offer to do is I'll take a look at the minutes of this meeting, I'll share it with what I wrote up. Maybe can synthesize that into a simple statement that we can refer to and use going forward, and understanding that when we get down to specifics on a map, we're probably going to find disagreements as well there. This process has confounded everyone who's ever tried to do it before. One of the things I've noticed in reading some of the history of this is that in 1965, when there was a special election that moved to 150 House seats, is that and dropped 94 members. The number of women in the House dropped immediately, and it recovered, but it took some time to recover when that stuck in my mind. The next agenda item is updates. One of the things I wanted to flag, and I don't think we have we haven't figured this one out yet. We don't have all the information on it. Tom Koch and I worked with Mia Crow on Friday afternoon with district building to try to get a little better at it. And during the course of that discussion, Mia Crow mentioned that the sharing and therefore the posting to the rest of the board and to the public of a map that has been done in Maptitude is very tricky and difficult to do, and can only be done by asking the tech team at the Legislative Council to first do something with that map so that it can be in some fashion shared, and even, I think, printed if you wanted to print it. And this also arose because at the last meeting, Chris, I think, asked, and maybe subsequently emailed saying, please send in your maps as they are completed so that we can share them with the board. And post them to the website. And that apparently is relatively simple with District Builder, but far less so with Aptitude, which is at the very least unfortunate and problematic, et cetera, because that's not certainly how I recall it from working with it 10 years ago. That I don't recall that. So Chris, have you learned anything more about that, Chris?
I haven't yet. I need to ask Mia what the technical or the complexity is of being able to do that. And I have asked her this morning just now by Teams chat, so I should know shortly. I don't know what the levers are on the legislative council or legislative IT side that need to happen in order to get those maps out there.
If I could mention something real quick, when I've used remote desktop in the past, there is a way to enable sharing a USB drive or sharing a drive or a folder between the local machine and the remote virtual machine or the remote machine that you're connecting to. I haven't played with it enough to see if I can sort of get that to work, but that might be an okay angle to be able to get the stuff that's on that machine back out onto whatever machine you're connecting from.
Because it's at some point, I think we're going to want in a board meeting to be able to put a Maptitude map up on the screen and share that so we can suggest changes to it in real time as we get further along in our work. And it's in order to support that and allow people to get prepared to do that, having access to that Maptitude base map ahead of time on our own computers is going to be essential. I suppose we could end up working more in District Builder, and then when we get to a certain point with a map, with a District Builder map, have that converted into a Maptitude map and go from there. But, I see Michael Chernick, you're tuned in. So if that's information that if you, I think Mia Crow from the Secretary of State's office is going to be contacting Legislative Council IT directly, but you're welcome to share that and see what you can learn at your end.
Mr. Chair, it's Michael Chernick from Legislative Council for the record. Amron, from one of my colleagues, of course, from Leg Council, is also on this transmission, and we can both convey to Duncan Goss and to Kevin Moore that there's a concern with respect to being able to exchange and most importantly post the current version of Maptitude online for both your use and for the public's. I do know that we regularly posted up Maptitude maps the last round. I know in committee and House Ops, we did it all the time. And with the Senate Special Committee as well. So I hope that the software hasn't gone backwards in 10 years. But in the meantime, we will convey this to Kevin and Duncan later this morning after the meeting, that the board has a real concern. And it sounds to me as if Kevin and Duncan and Mia may need to have a direct tech-to-tech conversation about how to untangle this. But we definitely, Amron and I will definitely convey this today.
Thank you. It may simply be an effort to make things more secure, which explains a lot of what's happening in technology these days.
Tom,
Gene,
I just had a maptitude, if this is a good time to
it is.
keep on the maptitude topic. So I had actually a few my own issues with maptitude that were some of which could be related to other work. Hopefully there won't be for other people. And I ended up clarifying a bunch of things with Delia Gillen, and she's been also working with Duncan, I believe. And I'm planning to stop to meet with her after this meeting in person to finish the work. But the main issues were, and this, others may not have encountered this because it sounds like a lot of people are working from scratch, building up their own maps, not using the prior map at all, like the current enacted House or Senate maps as a starting point. But I was interested in doing that, seeing what would happen if I tried to do that. So in other words, I tried to load up a current House map with the current census numbers in there, obviously. And then kind of as a way to look at what we got and what needs to be changed, kind of take that route. And I immediately encountered a problem. The first of which I think makes the most, was solvable pretty quickly, which is those enacted House maps that are in maptitude are read only for reasons that make sense once I went back and forth with Delia a little bit, because we want to keep those the way they are, but you can save them and then start modifying them yourself. So that part I got clarified. For me, there was a more fundamental problem with my account, which they also, I think, have finished fixing. I couldn't really get in there to actually do any more work. And what's the other thing I wanted to add? Maybe that's all for the moment. Oh, no, sorry. There was another thing that Mary and I were kind of looking at. We kind of had a Zoom session together just to kind of support each other in our maptitude efforts before I realized I couldn't really get very far. And we did, Mary noticed, and then we looked at a little more closely that again, with this enacted House map that some of you maybe aren't even looking at, but some of the displayed deviation percentages were incorrect. And it became clear they were incorrect because the type of district was coded incorrectly. So if something is a single member district but coded as a double member district, it's going to look really small, artificially, and vice versa. So that's another thing I'm trying to get. It looks like maybe they worked out because I just was in communication with Delia, and it looks like they've made some progress. So hopefully, for those of you, maybe others on the board are not going to take this approach ever, and it won't really be an issue for you, but it does seem like a good thing to get clarified in any case, because obviously some of this information may translate. That is, well, anyway, so that's what's been going on. I just wanted to relay that in case anybody encounters something of a similar nature you might be useful to you.
Likewise, in District Builder, it only recognizes single member districts. So if you build a 2-member district, the deviation of the population deviation will be skewed accordingly. So you just have to say, okay, we're going to ignore that and we're going to treat it as a 2-member district.
Right. I should add, I didn't actually get that far because I wanted someone else's eyes on it before I tried to make sense of it myself. But it looked, as far as I could tell, that the underlying town populations were all fine. That wasn't the issue. It was that, at least based on the Excel sheets of the town populations I had, those seemed to be correct. It was more this other coding problem, which was resolved.
Anyone else, any other board members want to update us or comment on mapping efforts? Rob, have you been?
Yeah, I've been working in District Builder. And
Where did you start your map?
I started in Stowe for obvious reasons.
The
Well,
center of the universe?
The center of the universe. Well, also because it's
it
for
all
two
falls
reasons.
apart after that.
For two reasons. One, it's my hometown, and the other is because with the population explosion in Stowe, it sort of, in Lamoille County, it makes, somebody once was doing some work on my house and said, always do the hardest part first. So as you can see, I've sort of got the northern part of the state done. And, I started in Stowe and worked up through Franklin County and then around into the kingdom. And I still got a ways to go before I have something that I can present.
And you're working in district builder?
Yep.
Good. I mentioned that Tom and I had a little tutorial on Friday. Jeremy, Ed, or Mary, do you want to share anything in terms of your own mapping exploits?
I don't have anything new to share.
Okay. Okay, well, we'll go on. I have, sorry, Ed, go ahead.
Tom, I have a question, just, it's more of a procedural question. So we're all working on these maps. Then what?
We're going to share them.
And then what happens after that?
And then we're going to see if a consensus emerges, or where a consensus might emerge, I think. And if that means picking one version of a house map, for example, and trying to develop that into a more perfected or mature consensus, I think that makes sense.
All right. So let me just to reiterate. So hopefully we can consolidate around one, even if it's not perfect, and then try and hammer out some consensus on the one that we pick. Is that essentially it?
That's, I think, the way we've been, that's directionally where we've been headed. I think we're all open to hearing a different way of doing it.
Oh, no, I don't have a different way. I just wanted to make sure that I understood correctly. Thank you.
Chris, Chris and I worked on a notice to the boards of civil authority via the town and municipal clerks. Where does that, has that gone out?
That has gone out, and I've also shared that same notice on what's known as the MuniNet. A lot of town officials and administrators, all the town clerks are on the MuniNet, which is a listserv. And so that notice has gone out to the town clerk's list. We don't have a great list of all the other local officials, but going through the town clerk should get us to just about everybody we need, and through the MuniNet, I think got the word out.
Who supports the MuniNet? Is that?
It's a UVM listserv that's been around for a really long time.
I'll follow up with you and see whether we should also send the same thing to the lead and ask them to send it.
Sure.
And that simply tells them our schedule for getting the initial house plan out to boards of civil authority, so they can start preparing for that, and explains, among other things, that a town can either respond on its own back to us, or if the initial proposal from the board puts that town into a district with another town, that those two towns can have a joint meeting of their boards of civil authority and respond to us, or try to respond to us in a united sort of way.
And I'll also point out, Tom, that notice is posted at the top of the resources page.
And Chris and I are getting a few, inquiries or questions looping back about that process. Again, in many cases, there's nobody in the town that remembers doing this 10 years ago. So they're starting from scratch. I think I shared with you the most, if not all, of the interactions I've had with members of the public. I received a request from I think the Chittenden County League of Women Voters that's organizing a forum for October, whenever that is, sooner than that, sometime soon. And I think I shared that and asked anyone else on the board who wants to participate to let me know. There's some kind of national redistricting election focused webinar that some students at Middlebury College are hosting or participating in early to mid-October that I will send you more about. It's clearly not just about Vermont's legislative redistricting. I don't think I've heard anything new since last reported from the constituents of the Mount Mansfield Unified Union School District about where the town of Huntington is placed in a House or in a Senate district. Maybe I have. I don't know. That's the single biggest source of incoming questions and concerns.
So I did find the League of Women Voters request was for October 7th, 7 p.m. But I thought you had one prior to that as well. That was this 5 town boards of civil authority. Which I thought was a different.
Oh, that was
meeting.
like Jericho, Underhill.
Right, that I think is like the 29th of September. Hold on, wait.
That's the Mount Mansfield Union Unified District.
Yes, that's the 29th, Wednesday, the 29th,
September.
right. And the other, the League of Women Voters is the 7th of October.
But yeah, I can go to the Mount Mansfield one if we want to have a physical human there.
I can go to that one too.
I don't recall whether they're asking people to show up in person. They're doing it town by town, so you can go to.
Well, they're doing it on Zoom and they're having 5 town meetings that are connected. It would make sense to me just to do it virtually. Because you'll get a better picture of what's going on.
Yeah.
But if they want a person there, I can be an ambassador. Things that you
I
can
mean,
do.
since I will be around, I would be happy to. It says participants are going to be encouraged to attend via Zoom, but we will have a physical location at all 5 towns for public to gather if they wish. So yes,
So Zoom makes more sense.
that's.
Okay. Chris, is the Secretary of State's office getting any incoming inquiries or questions that aren't coming through the apportionment board site?
I haven't seen many at all. Tom, I can check with the secretary to see if he's heard anything. You did see the one that came up on MuniNet that I shared back with you, which was just around, does that mean we have to call a Board of Civil Authority meeting? And that's our response back was not unless you hear from the LAB with something that affects your town.
I mean, I think the best advice to boards of civil authority is to, for planning purposes, plan on holding a meeting. And if you don't have to hold the meeting, you don't have, you can cancel it.
But I think that's it from the Secretary of State's office. I think people are reaching out to you all directly. That's what I've been seeing. Oh, and I should just note that we have closed the survey. And the survey, there were 634 responses to the survey. And I've asked our person who's running the survey here in the office to pull the summary of results. And so I have a couple of PDFs I can share with the board when you think it's appropriate, Tom, to go over that.
I also want to note that Representative Sims did submit a brief note to our other contact form about the desire of constituents to learn more about the process. This coincided with some of our discussion about wanting to get to other parts of the state or some effort in that direction. I don't know if Representative Sims is still here and would like to speak to it. Hi.
Yeah, hi folks, Representative Catherine Sims from Orleans, Caledonia up in the Kingdom. And yeah, I've been having some conversations with a number of constituents who have been tracking some of the changes around the census, both within my district and more broadly in the Northeast Kingdom. And folks would love to better understand the process and how they might be involved and what it might mean for our district. And so if there's interest, I'd be happy to coordinate on holding, some sort of, presentation by members of the board to the community and an opportunity to field conversations and questions. And, I think that's of particular interest to me around my district, but, also would suggest that folks up here in the Kingdom are used to driving long distances or connecting and sort of thinking about the region as a whole. So if it made sense to do something more for like Orleans or Essex or Caledonia County in general, happy to kind of think on that level if that makes more sense given everyone's limited time and energy. So.
Great.
If I could add something really quick to this too, I just got an email from folks at Rights and Democracy, and apparently they're trying to put together an event along with VPIRG. They want to do an event. They are setting up an event about reapportionment for the evening of Tuesday, September 28th. I don't have any more details than that, other than they're saying they'd love to have as many members of the board join that as possible, but I don't have invites. I don't have specific times or anything like that.
Jeremy, could you repeat the first part of what you said? I missed it.
Sure. So I just got an email, like just got an email from somebody at Rights and Democracy. And they, in conjunction with VPIRG, so I don't know if our VPIRG rep, he left, I guess. They're intending to do a reapportionment online event on the evening of Tuesday, September 28th, and they're inviting the board to attend if anyone so chooses.
Picking up. This may be a good time, Chris, if you wanted to, can you put that slide with the redistricting survey?
Sure. Eric, are you able to put that up on your screen?
For the public feedback responses?
Yeah, the one without all of the individual responses, but the one that summarizes.
Yep, just give me one moment.
So there are two PDFs that I'll share with the board, and I'll email to the board and put up on the website for all the public to see. We just got these this morning, but I can share them now. Eric's going to put them on his screen.
Are you able to see them?
Yes.
Okay.
If you could scroll slowly, Eric. So this is the first question regarding whether you prefer single-member House districts or two-member House districts. And yeah, if you scroll down far enough to show the graph and the answer, there you go. So you can see the responses here. The preference for single-member districts is about 75%. Preference for two-member districts about 19%, and no preference of about 6%. Scroll down. So which of the following statements best reflects your thoughts about single representative versus two representative House districts? Again, scroll down a little bit. So about 60% believe all Vermont House districts should be single representative districts. About 20 to 21% prefer single representative House districts, but don't have any problem with 2 representative districts. 10% prefer 2 representative House districts, but don't have a problem with single. And 9% that all districts should be 2 representative districts. So there are some free text answers that you'll see in the other version of this PDF.
Wow.
Yeah, you'll have some 300 answers to go through there to take a look at. If the board wants, we can try to, on our end, synthesize some of those and maybe group them if possible, so they're a little easier for you to digest.
Sure.
Thank you.
Question 4, how important is it that House district lines conform to town and city borders? So we have a lot of strong preference for single member districts, but we also have a lot of preference for conforming to city and town borders. We've got 52% saying that's extremely important, 39% saying it's somewhat important, and 9% saying it's not at all important. So these are some hypotheticals that I won't read the whole question here, but I'm asking people how they would tackle a redistricting
What do you
problem.
have to do?
That's right. And you see some mixed responses here as to how people would tackle this. 42% said creating districts with population deviations as close to 0% as possible is to best honor one person, one vote should take priority out of drawing districts to conform to existing town lines. And then about 58%, as long as the population deviations are not remain anywhere within constitutionally accepted limits, respect for recognized community boundaries should take priority over more perfectly equal representation. Sounds easy, right? Next.
That's actually an important point, though.
Yeah.
Although I'm not 100% certain that's statutorily the way we're supposed to look at it.
This question was, how would you draw the lines to solve another mapping problem here, the 3 towns A, B, and C with differing populations? And you can see the 2 choices there that we gave. Most people preferred about 65% saying combine all of towns B and C plus 700 from town A to form the first population 4,300 single representative district, and then take the remaining 4,300 of town A to form a second single representative district.
10 years from now, I want to add, no, I'm not going to be on board, but 10 years from now, whoever's on the board should add, what if you live in town A?
And then we have the other 35% saying combine all of them and create a one population of 8,600 with 2 representatives in that district. Next, please. Rank in order of importance the municipal boundary lines you think the state representative district should best reflect. You can see all the choices there. And if you scroll down, Eric, there's kind of a 1 through 8 here ranking, and it looks like squinting a little bit here. Looks like town border comes in first.
Can you go back up to the chart?
Sure.
Yeah, so the numbers along the bottom are not, I'm sorry, are those?
Let's see. 2, 3, 4.
Are they just the number?
4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 choices here.
Oh, I see.
All of that seems to make quite a bit of sense. I mean, most people don't know.
My guess is that the chart reflects the average for where that was ranked in a 1 through 8 scale. So on average, town was ranked around, I guess that wouldn't make sense.
I think that's right, Eric. And then school district was second most popular.
That's how I, just quickly looking at it, that's how I read it, but
Yep.
I didn't want to.
County
Zoom.
third, geographic fourth, supervisory union fifth, and then you can see health services, environmental.
That makes sense.
And then solid waste district lines coming in
Somewhere in
somewhere in there. Next one, please, Eric. Let's see. Do you prefer single Senate districts? One senator per Senate district, around 21,500 people, or multi-Senate districts. And if you could scroll down. So pretty heavy preference here, about 64%. All Senate districts should be single senator districts. 17-18% prefer single Senate districts, but don't have a problem with 2 or 3 senator districts. 10 to 11%, I prefer multi-senator Senate districts, but don't have a problem with single. And then 8% believing that all districts should be multi-senator districts. And how important is it to you that Senate districts conform to county lines? You see a strong preference there, very important or somewhat important, from about 90% and about 10% saying not important at all. And I think that's it. Is there another one, Eric, or is that the end of it? Oh, we have another. How important is it to you that House district lines conform to Senate district lines? Again, you can scroll down. We have roughly, again, 80% saying either very important or somewhat important, and 20% saying not at all important. And then we have a bunch of comments. A little bit of information about who filed the
Could
survey.
you go back up to that? Is there any geographic, let's say, so we could figure out if we wanted to.
We could. Looks like we could sort on that and figure that out.
Yeah, you could sort on town, for instance. Because I'm not sure how few slipped through without town, but
Right.
So name and town with the required responses. Yeah. Sorry.
I'm not sure if we required it because it looks like there's 98.4 who have. I think this is just telling who answered the question, city or town. So there are a few that slipped through without answering that question.
I mean,
they weren't required, but I think that the copy for what was put into SurveyMonkey had the asterisks in the text. So that made it over to SurveyMonkey. So while it was not a required answer, I think some people may have thought, oh, I should put in this info.
Yeah. So we've just gotten this morning. We have some more. We'll take some more time to dig into the details and see if there's any helpful information for you as far as who responded and where they were from.
Yeah, I'd be also interested to see how many, town clerks, JPs filled it out, as well as, versus regular citizens.
You remind me of the magic numbers at 4287.
mhm. It's been seared. I guess.
4262.
It wasn't seared, it was something like
I
that.
asked,
Wasn't it?
No, that
It
couldn't
was
be larger.
41.
I thought you said, what was the new number?
4287.
Yeah, I think it was 4262. 10 years ago. So I'll look it up. No, because I asked motor vehicles if I could have that license plate. They said no.
Now that would be inside. Inside Pittsburgh.
Thank you.
Thank
And,
you, yes.
let's get that posted so we can.
Thanks for doing that.
I know that John Adams was unable to join us today, so we don't have any input or updates from him. Amarin or Michael, do you have any information you can share about whether any legislative committees looking into redistricting may be starting to think about getting organized for later this year? Just he said out of curiosity. Michael,
Other than that, Tom, I'll say, I think you can anticipate that by the, Amron's coming on now.
That's okay. Good morning, everyone. This is Amber Abergilly, Office of Legislative Counsel. I couldn't tell, Michael, if you were answering, if you were frozen for a moment there. At the moment, there are no set plans for any committees to meet. I believe in part the committees are waiting to see the LAB's work, and I don't have any specifics as to when the committees might start meeting.
One thing I wanted to add, Mr. Chair, is it would not surprise me if by the end of the year, there is some preliminary legislative activity, just speaking broadly and historically. But as Amron was saying, given the late schedule because of the situation this year, nothing at the moment is going on.
thank you. I don't think the agenda has any other old business or new business, but there's always room for other business, if you have any. And including setting the next meeting day, which I think has been set for 2 weeks from today. With the proviso that people should be working busily on developing map proposals in the interim. Any other business you'd like to bring to the board's attention? And
No.
Representative Sims, I will be in touch with you to follow up with your email. Chris, anything from your end?
Nothing here. Thank you.
Okay, great. We'll stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. I have to say that